Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Canisius Rozario. I'm the CTO for Collide, started about 6 months ago. It's been quite an incredible journey. My background is software. I've been in software tech for about 20 years, different companies in Austin, sort of doing a lot of the up and down between Austin and Houston. I'm excited to be joined by Bill Arend. He's the managing director at Microsoft, overseeing a lot of the strategic teams that interface within the energy sector, the enterprise companies, and over 2 decades of experience that spans Workday, Oracle, Data Gumbo. So been around the block a long time for just great companies. But Bill, maybe if you could share a couple of things and I can kick us off into the conversation.
Yeah, I appreciate the opportunity. Thanks for the invite. I have some cold sweats. My last startup was in the Cannon over there. And ironically enough, where's Bobby? He's not here. I got to tell him that the beginning of the end was Grayson Mill acquired the assets from Equinor. Equinor was our major vendor or major funder. And that we were about a month from go live when that acquisition happened. Brutal. But anyway, 31 years in this enterprise software space, seen a few things. This Gen AI story is something that we'll all look back at in our careers as one of the most generational impacts we've had.
Awesome, thank you. And to kick off the conversation, we're going to focus a lot more on, as it says, that the on-prem and cloud, that is still a thing across compute, data security, AI. AI is everywhere, right? And Microsoft is also at the forefront. And just for context, Collide Enterprise is built on Azure technology. That's the full stack that we use. A lot of really amazing Microsoft tools, Azure, that's Doc Intelligence, AI service. So we are very much embedded within the Microsoft ecosystem. Part of that is just because, so my background is a lot more AWS, but this was the first time that I was moving over into Azure because pretty much every oil and gas company is a Microsoft shop. So by default, that gives us a lot more kind of enterprise entry and just that integration in. But what I found was that while everybody does talk about AWS, the Azure ecosystem is super strong now, and especially for the developers, so you can actually get up and running very quickly. It was very impressive, actually, to see how far it's come. So, Bill, to kick us off, in oil and gas companies are still split between cloud and on-prem, like a lot of the enterprises are. What are, in your opinion, the key factors that should guide that decision today? And how do you see that migration path for a lot of companies?
Yeah, no, it's certainly a journey. And when I boomeranged back to Microsoft, it was before this AI story broke. And when you look at what's happened with AI, it's been around for 50 years. 1950, artificial intelligence was in. People sometimes forget that. Well, why is it all of a sudden the front page news? And it's really because of generative AI. And so what has happened is the technology that is out there from this Gen AI story, and OpenAI got to 100 million users in 3 months. The internet took 9 years, cell phones 14 and a half years to get to 100 million. So all of a sudden this explosion happened of something that's making an impact in how people interact with this solution called ChatGPT. And so immediately to be able to have that kind of compute and be able to have that kind of capability, cloud became a requirement. And so we don't have the discussions. I lead a team focused on our large enterprise space for the energy sector. We don't have, midstream still has a lot more on-prem than cloud, but most of the E&Ps are all they've made a migration to the cloud. So it's a situation now where the decision criteria isn't so much winning or losing on the cloud or not. It's a strategy of hybrid and at the edge and being able to develop a strategy that's both, right? And I think that is what's playing out at a theater near you. One of the upstreams that I worked with hadn't met with Microsoft in many, many years, and he told me, leaned in and said, I have to talk to you now because you have what I need, which is compute and being able to take advantage of something that is delivered in a cloud at scale. So that's the big change is what's taking place. That's been I guess I would say the driver to this movement towards the cloud at a huge scale.
No, awesome. And on that topic, if we dig into compute a little bit, since that's come up multiple times and these models require a lot of compute power, how is Microsoft and Azure scaling to that? Because the demand's a lot. I've heard some people talk about let's just kind of put our own data center in our own racks and our own compute just so that it's cheaper. We can access. Like, what are your comments on something like that?
I mean, the sheer buying at scale is just unbelievable with the three hyperscalers, right? So we'll announce earnings here, and we'll talk about the capital expenditures and what we're doing to build out our data centers and what we're doing. The volume and the size, and it's massive. I think it's $80 billion of investment so far this calendar year, on building infrastructure to deliver compute at scale. If a small company or a medium-sized company or even a large enterprise decides to do that on their own, they can, but they can't do it at the kind of scale we can in any of the hyperscalers. So I think there's a reality check there.
Yeah. Awesome. So the next thing that I've definitely run into a lot when we have talked to our clients for Collide, Joe can attest to it when we were talking to his IT team, is a lot around data security, right? Compliance, data security. People are very sensitive about that. This is my data. I don't want to give it to anybody else. And how do you make sure that you're not training on my data, which is a very common question, and keeping customer data segregated. We have built on Azure with the trust that Microsoft provides a lot of that. But being an insider, could you shed some light into how Microsoft and Azure goes through that process?
Yeah, it's table stakes. It's built on trust. I mean, this is a story here where people are taking their intellectual property, they're taking their crown jewels and putting it in the cloud, and they want to make sure that it's not going places that shouldn't be, where people have access to it. So a true multi-tenant SaaS story is effectively sharing infrastructure. Well, the data is encrypted, the data is separated. There's strategies here on how our customers are protecting their data. Under zero circumstances are we using our customers' data to train the models. The exception is if they opt in. So there are things that it's very important, and we put in our contracts, it's a big part of our Secure First initiative, which is in order for us to build on trust, we have to make sure that our LLM and the training that we're doing is not taking and commingling other customers' data. It's an opt-in motion, and we have a copyright and a data protection clause in our agreements that is effectively saying we are putting our money where our mouth is, and it's very important. If we betray that trust, then bad consequences. So to me, this world of building out models and being able to take and building a competitive advantage with what AI can bring. We were talking earlier about some of the examples in your world, and the last thing we want to do is be able to take a company, a small, medium, or large customer, and be able to take their data where another customer is using their data to help do something with it, right? So the story here for us is built on encryption, it's built on segmentation, and it's built on a contractual obligation. So for us, it's table stakes. And when you look at how our customers are architecting at the highest end with what we're doing with ExxonMobil, what we're doing with ConocoPhillips, what we're doing with Chevron, every one of our customers is doing unbelievably sophisticated things. Each of them are architecting it differently based on where they're at, and we have to meet them where they're at. And that's part of the story. And the underpinning and the setup for your session was perfect because the data is the foundation of it all. And so we have a data set and a data story that we have to meet customers where they're at. We have to build on that data in order to train the models and be able to help our customers build these stories where they can solve some complex business problems and do it in a way that they can trust that we're not doing that improperly with mixing and mingling data.
Yeah. And that's something that's very core to Collide as well, because as I've kind of seen a lot of customers across SMB all the way to enterprise, everybody has a little bit different deployment model that they want to support in the cloud, right? Some people want to support the traditional SaaS, just make sure that there's data protection, right? And we just want to log into ai.collide.io. On the other spectrum, people have Azure set up already within their environments, and they want the Collide enterprise application to be deployed, fully managed. And then there's a whole spectrum that goes in. Well, is that kind of what you also see happening across the industry, that especially with these SMB to enterprise scaling, like what kind of deployment models have you normally seen other companies and other partners go through?
Yeah, I think it's depending on size, really, more say size and scale. Our large NOCs are putting their data in their own tenant, and then the ISVs have to meet them where they're at and do things different to their configuration. There's sovereignty rules with data, and you'll be able to have data in country. So there's rules that dictate where things are going to play. But once again, it goes back to a hybrid as a strategy. It's not a stopgap. So there's bad connectivity. You need to have stuff at the edge. You have sovereignty rules. You've got to meet the government's responsibilities and the goals, and not the goals, but the restrictions that the government's put on data sovereignty. So architecting for that is going to be a hybrid story. The SMBs, the small to medium businesses who don't have that luxury of having a deep bench of people, this is where the multi-tenancy and the ability to leverage a SaaS model makes a lot more sense. Pure play, right? But I think we see it all over the map. And the trouble that it presents is for ISVs like Collide, you have to meet your customer where you're at. Even at the highest level, when some of my customers in my portfolio are Halliburton and SLB, I mean, they have the same exact problem. So their story, they have to architect their solution at scale and be able to meet the customers where they're at. And what we're seeing is the SMBs are agreeing with and are able to lean in with how it's constructed out of the box with their story. And then the large NOCs are saying, no, you need to put it in my tenant. And so there needs to be adjusted in configurations and architecture to meet them and meet those requirements, which is complex.
Yeah, no, and definitely faced a lot of that across. And I think Azure also definitely helps with having a lot of dev tools that actually allow us to move. But at the same point, for the enterprise clients, they do require a lot more customizations, which is where then we have to budget for that properly too, right? Like it can't be the same solution that's sold in a complete SaaS environment that's then sold in an enterprise. I'm assuming that's very similar to what you have seen as well.
Absolutely. And I think there's the art of this is monetizing it and putting a pricing engagement that makes sense. There should be a premium on something that's put on the customer's tenant, because the way ISVs are set up, I mean, you look at ServiceNow, they're charging a 20% premium if you want it in the customer's tenant. You look at Salesforce, you look at anybody who's a SaaS solution, their multi-tenant nature, the ability to support that customer and be able to have innovation pushed in a very quick way. Those stories, there's a story that's playing out and how to monetize all this and make it reasonable, and it's business outcome based, right? So I think some of the use cases y'all were talking about, the power of the story is it's problems that companies have been facing for years that haven't been able to really put technology to it. So this is really a land grab for taking, and you look at the headlines of all the layoffs and the things that have happened. It's lean and people are being asked to do more. It's all business outcome driven, and solutions like Collide and what you can do to really help scale up and go execute on things where it was very people oriented. This is where the agents and the AI world is shifting how workflows are executed. So it's going to be a fun run. We're just beginning.
Yeah, awesome. My next question is, this is the platform and the innovation behind Microsoft and Azure and what we are using as our rails. Like in your opinion, what makes Azure particularly well positioned at this point for the energy sector? And which innovations? We talked about AI Foundry, we talked about Doc Intelligence. I know Microsoft has a lot of things brewing right now. Like, what do you think will have the biggest impact in the near term, as well as we are kind of shifting towards using more Microsoft built technologies?
Yeah, I think we've been in the energy sector from the get-go here. We haven't left it and come back. We're very laser focused on serving our customers. The unfair advantage that I think we have is When you look at the initial use cases of how Copilot, how many in here actually use Copilot, just out of curiosity? So when that first came out, it was sort of a nice, man, this is pretty neat, right? It's a toy. And that toy was sold and given to our customers, and it was a productivity assistant for your traditional productivity tools, your Office, your Teams, your Outlook. As things have evolved, it's moved into a world where people are extending those copilots. Our ISVs are embedding copilots into their solution, and that becomes the new user interface of what we expect. We expect to interrogate data using natural language queries. And interrogating that data assumes the data is right, which we all know it's a journey. You're not going to have perfect data out of the gates. So the unfair advantage we have is we have these productivity tools, which I believe are up to 400 million users of our productivity tools with these copilots that are attached to them, where our customers are starting to use them in novel, interesting ways. And now they're extending those copilots. And now we're in this new generation called agentic AI, where it's actually sophisticated to the next turn of the wheel. Here is how you can take a workflow and have agents as part of your day-to-day activities. That's unbelievable to me, but it's real. Every day I'm in meetings, I have a facilitator agent in my meeting. I have a project manager agent in my meeting. And those things are helping me be more productive, and pick that from frontline operations, pick that from legal, HR, finance, pick a room of the house within these enterprises. Our opportunity to attach solutions on our stack that are taking last mile functionality in the oil and gas segment, that's not what we are. We are a platform, and we want ISVs and companies like Collide to develop to their heart's content very sophisticated solutions on top of our stack that's driven by security and by scale. And our story of Copilot Studio plus the orchestration of agents and using our AI Foundry. I think the old Microsoft was much more proprietary. I think today our AI Foundry has 4,000 models in it. Pick your model, build your own model. And the story of building that out is tremendous opportunity for every one of our customers to be able to take advantage of. So I think we have a first mover, and the term we're using is we want to help our customers be frontier firms. So getting out in front of your competition. I think small to medium customers get a chance to play above their weight class. I think you could do a lot with less.
Yep, no, makes sense. And actually building on to something you already mentioned about how Azure and Microsoft is the platform, right, for ISPs like us to build on top of. I'd like to dig in on that a little bit, because some of the questions we have to field is, I already have from our clients, right, our customers, that I already have Microsoft, I already have Azure, I already have SharePoint, I have Copilot. Why can't I just do this myself, right? Why can't I just give my agent all these files? What is special about Collide? Right? Like, why should we go for Collide? So I know you know a little bit about Collide as well. So I would love that answer from somebody sitting in that can actually help me answer the question for our clients too.
Yeah, well, I think that in the software business, there's always the build versus buy discussion, right? Do I build something myself, or do I buy something that's off the shelf and it's already been built for the purpose that I'm looking for, right? I think the ability for companies to look in the mirror and recognize that they're not software companies. They're operators. They're definitely not maybe self-admitting to that. I think that's part of the challenge. But I think when I look at Collide and I look at Microsoft, it's an and. It's not an either or. I think people are recognizing that what you all do, and frankly, every ISV that's developed a last mile piece of functionality on top of our platform, it's designed to go solve a problem. It takes time to develop a solution to that problem. And if it's already been done and dusted, where you've had repeat and it's at scale and you've proven it with stories, that the time to value is unbelievably powerful, because now you can plug something in. And just think about your example with the Railroad Commission filings. I mean, that in real time saved the company a lot of time and heartache and money, Okay, so building that yourself, I mean, you just in your session there, Bobby, you talked about stories of the data and the challenges of getting there. You all have already done it. You've gone through the parsing and the. I'm not going to be able to nail all the terms. I learned terms, but I've heard before, but I'm not intimately knowledgeable about all of that. But that stuff takes time, effort. It's hard. I look at SLB and they're huge. They're a monster. They're just their Lumi product and their story is brand new, right? It's a lot harder than people think. And that's where the Collide plus Microsoft story resonates really well, especially to Microsoft, because we're not going to develop that last mile functionality. We're going to enable our customers to use our platform. We want to support our partners like Collide to help you go scale it.
No, that's awesome. And I think that's kind of the secret sauce, right, that we are building here as well, which is very specific to oil and gas, to make sure that we can build the search in that manner that is very context aware, and the workflows. The agentic workflows has been a big piece of what we are building that's resonated a lot with our clients as well. But I'd also like to open up the floor for questions as well. I know we have kind of discussed a couple of things, but would love to take some questions.
I'm a petroleum engineer, not an IT guy, so I'll ask a data security question, which is weird for me to ask. So as I think about this increase in computing power and AI continuing to get smarter and smarter, what are your thoughts around the risk of that in encryption with quantum computing or whatever increases computing power? Do we get to a point where it could break encryption such that people are going back on-prem so that it's not connected, or is that not a risk?
Not a risk. I don't think that's a risk. I think reality here for that, and I was going to actually comment on your question you asked earlier about the use case you were describing. Think about a law firm. We had a law firm come speak to us. They had 60 to 80 retirees every year. What they did is they took the legal findings, all the proceedings that lawyer took over their career. They scanned, they did everything you were talking about, Bobby, with taking and imaging, whether it was a napkin or whether it was a court proceeding. They loaded it and created the story around that individual so they can always interrogate and ask questions of that lawyer that's leaving. Think about that for operations. Think about that for landmen, any critical role that's aging out, that's leaving, being able to pull that knowledge in to a platform that can help you ask it questions. There's tremendous value in that. And that by default, all that data is encrypted already in there. So everything we do and everything that happens will be in a safe, secure environment where mixing and mingling, whether that's on-prem or at the edge or in a hyperscaler, that's all protected beyond what you could do yourself. So I just don't view that as a risk.
So was it last week, AWS US East 1 went down, right? And the whole internet shut down, basically. I think that brought up a lot more people talking about multi-cloud. And you talked about on-prem and cloud and hybrid, but can you speak about multi-cloud and probably some of the cautionary tales there?
Yeah, look at your headlines today. Anybody in this room is down, but 30% of the internet was down today. So I've been getting buzzed left and right with situations, but it's back and we're in good shape. But I think a single cloud story is more likely than a hybrid or a multi-cloud story. I think 5 years ago, the skill sets and the ability to hedge your bets was real because of it's all new. Let's see where this goes. I think people are now in a situation where the skill sets, it's a different world. Each flavor has a different set of skills, and that takes overhead, people, and I think what you're going to see more of is resiliency built into a single cloud environment. They're going to pick a horse. They can still have failover. They can still have stories that are allowing some resiliency built into their enterprise, but I think you'll see less of a multi-cloud strategy than you will a multi-cloud strategy. And I think that is largely economies of scale. That's not necessarily a resiliency strategy or, if I just pick one, what happens if it goes down? Today, all three were down. So it's not a matter of one versus the other in that situation. I think it's more of a building a skill set and an army of folks that can support and have the skill sets around each of the stories, because they're different. And I'm not saying one, I like Microsoft better, but there are certainly capabilities in each of these hyperscalers that are fantastic. And so now it becomes, how can we, at economies of scale with cost and headcount and people. So having two clouds becomes more expensive on the people side. And it doesn't necessarily play out as a negotiation to lower your costs, right? So resiliency is a tricky thing. We've become very dependent on technology. I mean, it's just a natural part of our day-to-day. We expect it in our personal lives. So when things go down, which will happen, it's inevitable. We have to have a backup plan, right? So that's part of the resiliency strategies that companies have to deal with. Midstream in particular, with the data and the stuff they're doing, most of the midstream customers have SCADA on-prem, and we're pulling that data for invoicing and for things. So if it goes down, it's a store and forward kind of thing. So there's strategies that can be built in with resiliency by not going to multiple cloud as your strategy. If that makes sense.
Yeah. I think one thing kind of came up there too, similar to your point about on-prem, almost thinking on-prem is safer, but it's like, do you want to manage your own Exchange server?
Right. Absolutely.
Everyone here is probably using Outlook, right? And it's being managed. So I mean, even if you're almost fully on-prem, you're still probably beholden to SharePoint and some of the other, or if you're on the Google Cloud, like, using G Suite and all that stuff.
Yeah, absolutely. It's interesting. That's security is part of this story, and it's a critically important part of the story. And if you think about, I hate to bash on it, but no one wants to be the Colonial Pipeline. That was one of the energy specific examples. If you double click on that, that was an on-premise server. That was an ERP story that was not in the cloud. So it was really interesting how that was used as an excuse for a lot of companies not to go to the cloud because of that situation. And when you look at that situation, it was actually an unpatched on-premise server that was the weak link. So I just don't see we're managing, I know the number may be wrong, but it's not far off, 4 trillion signals a day of security. And we're working with every one of the security providers out there to help them be better at catching the bad guy. So I think I like our chances of helping at scale versus an individual enterprise doing it themselves. It takes a village. It's not going to be one company that's going to keep people safe. So it's an important part.
Yeah, no, thank you. Probably have time for 1 or 2 more questions.
So I'm an attorney, so this may not be in the right tech language, but someone earlier talked about making sure if you're on the cloud that you retain access to your data. You talked about how everybody's looking to monetize this. Are companies now, like cloud companies now, looking for how they're going to charge you to bulk extract your data to do this?
Yeah, great question. So from a legal point of view, you own your data. It's your data. The access to it is ingress and egress charges, where your people are paying for taking data away and going to. So I think part of the story is people put handcuffs on that. There's a charge for that, right? So that's probably the context of one of that. But being if you have an on-premise portfolio of software, those customers or those ISVs, those software partners, are developing cloud solutions. And those cloud solutions are built on a history of 30 years of data of you using that software on-prem. So monetizing it, companies want, the software companies want to find ways they can take it and help learn on, so they take that data that you have, that history, and help make good use of that for you, but at a price, because they're building the models, they're doing something as a service, right? So where you get into trouble is when you don't have access to that data. And I think that was the call out, was making sure in your legal agreements that you have access to the data that you have created with the software that you're using. And it's just like Word, we don't own you're licensing Microsoft to use something that creates data. That data is yours. Where it's stored is the debate. It could be in your hard drive or OneDrive, or it could be in a SharePoint site, or it could be on a third-party server somewhere, right? Legal in the AI world was hard to get people on board at first. Now they're one of the leading cheerleaders for it, which is great. So if you're in the legal department, it's, the example of the documentation of the contracts, phenomenal use case. Being able to use document intelligence to track with M&A in particular, the discrepancies you have in agreements. And instead of having to peruse through all of that, the due diligence spent on just evaluating your contracts and your risks, you can automate that in a just unbelievable fashion that can give you access to a summary of where your risks are. So you're spending your time on the risks, not figuring out where they are. So anyway, that's sort of two answers to your one question, but legal has been a huge beginning stage 2 years ago was, hey, hold your roll, we're not gonna be able to do this. And then the other question that you'll have is data governance is such an important part, and AI exposes data. And if you don't have governance around your data, there is absolutely a risk that things can get exposed that shouldn't have been. So customers have to think about putting a governance plan in motion for their data, and they have to put some tagging, some form of protections in, because it'll surface information. And the worst thing that happens that we see, and it still, believe it or not, still happens, is shadow IT, where customers haven't embraced AI. Every single one of our customers has an AI strategy, an AI policy, but there are people who bring in their phones their own version, they're uploading documents, and all of a sudden that document is not protected under the enterprise world. It's up, and that's the part that we see. You're far better developing a strategy that embraces this than prevents it. And small to medium businesses are probably more susceptible to it now. I think most of the large enterprises have made very bold claims and done a good job of measuring it and managing it. But it is absolutely table stakes. You have to have good data, you have to have governance of that data, and then you have a whole slew of tools that you can use to unleash it to help drive productivity. So there's a lot there.
Hey, and Bill, just one quick question. What are one or two things when we're doing this again in 5 years that we're talking about, but nobody's thinking about today? So this is the crystal ball question, and go as crazy as you want with it.
Well, I think that where this is all heading is you've got this continuum here of AI. Like I mentioned, AI's been around for a long time. Machine learning, this thing it's evolved over the last 50, 60 years. We're in this agentic AI world where I think the most radical thing we're going to see is agents managing agents. So you have an agentic world now where there's agents, and you have Copilot as an assistant. You have agents that are invited to your events and your meetings. You're going to have agents managing other agents instead of people managing people. That's what's happening. I haven't seen it at scale, seen it talked about, we've had discussions about it, but some companies are taking that, and that is a real story. And I think the other part of this is I was asked earlier, where are we in the journey? It's the first inning. I mean, we haven't even at scale. There's so many trials of technology going on right now. I can't say that any one customer has gone far out where they're way ahead of anybody else. There's definitely some really good production examples where people are using AI that are affecting their bottom line, but it's not at scale. So 5 years from now, I fully expect to have agents managing agents at scale, and I expect that we're going to see generative AI in large enterprises and small businesses in a ubiquitous fashion. That's what I think is the 5-year window.
Awesome. Well, Bill, I think we are at time, but thank you so much for all the thoughts here, and I appreciate you taking the time to meet us. Thank you.